Hello and welcome back to Haywire34. This is week 11. Wow, thank you so much for coming back. Thank you, I really appreciate it. Today we shall be listening to chapters 29, 30, 31 and 32, and I hope you enjoy them. Chapter 29. As Hector and Penny neared Gretchen's home, they noticed a grey Hyundai Tucson parked in the spot where Gretchen had mentioned seeing it. "That's the car," Penny said to Hector. "You sure?" he asked. "Yes, I saw Gretchen get out of it at our last Wednesday club meeting, and that's Daniel." Hector quickly took a picture of the car and the man without drawing attention. This was now the 5th photo taken by friends on separate occasions, each showing Daniel's vehicle parked opposite Gretchen's house. Following a prearranged plan, Gretchen would call the police to report Daniel's stalking behaviour every time a friend managed to take a photo. The police had talked to Daniel the first 2 times, but since then he'd begun driving away as soon as he saw their car arriving. With photographic evidence from 5 different instances and all his texts and call logs, Gretchen planned to pursue a restraining order against him. After Hector took the picture, Penny immediately called Gretchen. "We've got it! Call them now!" she said. Gretchen responded, "Okay," and ended the call. A few minutes later, Penny and Hector saw the police car entering Dukes Avenue from Methuen Park. Hector began recording the scene as it unfolded. "He's not moving," Penny observed, but just as she finished speaking, Daniel suddenly pulled out from his parking spot and drove away via Rosebery Road. "I've got the whole thing on video," Hector declared triumphantly. With their task complete, they headed to Gretchen's house, where Rupert was waiting to drive Gretchen to hospital. To ensure Gretchen's safety, Rupert had volunteered to provide transportation for Gretchen and her family whenever possible. On days when Rupert was unavailable, another male friend would take over the shuttle service for Gretchen, making sure she was never alone and vulnerable. Instead of following Daniel, the police parked on the street and headed on foot to Gretchen's, where they knocked. Penny and Hector arrived just as the front door was opened by Gretchen, who stepped outside with Rupert. Gretchen's face looked drawn and exhausted, her eyes betraying the strain of the ongoing ordeal. Despite her fatigue, she managed a small grateful smile as she greeted her friends. "We've got the whole thing on video," Hector announced on their arrival. "Why didn't you follow him?" Penny asked the policeman with frustration. "We don't need to," the first policeman informed them. "We already know where he lives." "What good is that?" Penny riposted. "We'll have another word with him," he told the group. "You did that the first 2 times you came," Penny reminded them, "but it clearly hasn't worked, has it?" "We'll have a word with him," the second policeman reiterated. "It won't change anything. He's not scared of you," Penny insisted. "I still want to pursue getting a restraining order," Gretchen cut in. "Of course, madam. Us going to his residence to caution him is an added measure," the second policeman confirmed. "Added measure, indeed," Penny scoffed. The first policeman turned his attention to her. "I appreciate your concern for your friend, madam, and I realise that it looks as if we're not doing anything, but I assure you we're taking the matter very seriously, especially as there are minors at the residence. Other than talk to him a couple of times here, and now saying you'll go to his house, what exactly are you doing? Why haven't you arrested him?" "It doesn't quite work like that, madam, clearly, and that's why all these women keep getting murdered by stalkers." "Penny!" Hector scolded her. "Gretchen doesn't need to be frightened any more than she already is." "Sorry, Gretch," Penny apologised. "But she's right," Gretchen agreed. "He's relentless and you seem powerless to stop him." "Please trust that we're conducting our investigations, madam," the policeman assured them. "We hope our visit to his home will put a stop to things," the second policeman reassured the group. "And if it doesn't," Penny piped up, "we ask that you continue to do as you have been doing." Penny rolled her eyes. "We shall." Rupert suddenly spoke up. "Surely all the evidence we have gathered so far is enough to warrant his arrest." "I'm sorry, sir, we cannot disclose our procedures." "So you will be arresting him, is that what you're saying?" Rupert pressed the officer. "I didn't say that, sir." "So what are you saying?" Gretchen demanded with frustration. "Please be patient, madam. We are conducting our own investigations." "And again," Penny retorted sarcastically. "Please trust us, madam," the first officer appealed to Gretchen and her friends. "You are doing the right thing by gathering photographic and video evidence," his colleague repeated. "But please, the situation must not get physical. If he tries to stop you filming, if he tries to get physical, please walk away." He turned to Gretchen. "Continue with the restraining order, and we'll update you once we've paid a visit to him at his residence." "Thanks, I will. And if I can't take the call, please leave me a number and I'll call you back." "We will, madam." And please use the original case number if you have to call us back, the first man added. And try not to worry, madam, his colleague concluded kindly, and they left. As the four friends made their way back into the house, the twins' voices could be heard in the kitchen. "Who's that with them?" Penny asked on hearing an unfamiliar female voice. "Rose, Mick's mother." "Oh, how lovely!" Penny exclaimed. "Yes, she's been spending a lot of time here with the boys. It gives Auntie Bimbo a bit of a break, as they can be quite a handful, as we all know." "Where's Auntie Bimbo?" Penny asked. "Out shopping. She wanted to go to Dalston, so I booked her a cab, which will wait and bring her back when she's done." "I bet she wasn't best pleased with the cab idea," Penny laughed. "No, she wasn't," Gretchen confirmed. "But under the current circumstances, she allows me to get my own way without too much of a fuss. Ah, bless her, she means well," Penny concluded as they headed towards the kitchen. "I'll grab my bag," Gretchen told Rupert as she detoured to the stairs. She beckoned Penny as she did so, and the two women went upstairs. On arrival in her room, Gretchen revealed what was on her mind. "I'm going to tell Mick about Daniel, about everything," she announced to Penny's clear horror. "No, don't!" "I have to. I can't keep it back any longer. You must." "No," Gretchen said, shaking her head. "He's much stronger now, and they're talking about discharging him. I can't have him come home unaware. He's got to know what's going on." "Oh, God, I suppose you're right," her friend reluctantly conceded, and with that they headed back downstairs to join the others. End of chapter 29. Chapter 30. Adhering to their usual routine, Rupert dropped Gretchen off at the hospital, assuring her that he would return in 3 hours. As she exited the car, her footsteps felt more laboured than usual, each step echoing a sense of foreboding. The walk through the ground floor of the hospital seemed to stretch on endlessly. The familiarity of the route offered no comfort today. Gretchen approached the lift, pressing the button with a silent sigh. The soft ding signalling its arrival did nothing to lift her spirits. As she stepped inside, her reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at her, vapid and listless. The ascent to the 3rd floor felt slower than ever, the confined space amplifying her anxiety. As the doors finally opened, Gretchen sighed and willed herself to step out. The normally bustling ward now seemed subdued, as if sensing her inner turmoil. Each step towards Mick's room echoed with trepidation, her heart growing heavier with every thud of her shoes. To Gretchen's dismay, Mick was up and practising his walking, dashing her hopes of having some time alone to prepare for the challenging conversation. The sight of him moving around with determination, oblivious to her inner turmoil, made her heart sink even further. Gretchen hesitated for a moment, feeling ill-equipped to tackle the disclosure she needed to make. But with a deep breath she mustered the courage to approach Mick, aware that the difficult conversation could no longer be postponed. As the door closed behind Gretchen, Mick, who was facing the bed, glanced over his shoulder. "Hey!" he called out happily to her. "Hey!" she replied, her smile tinged with sadness. Before she could advance further, Mick shouted out to her, "Stay there! Let me walk to you!" With slow and measured movements, he used his Zimmer frame to turn and face Gretchen. "And now the walk begins," he narrated, steadying himself to begin his careful steps towards her as she obediently waited near the door. "Come on, Speedy Gonzales," Mick encouraged himself, the strain of each step evident on his face. "Show her what you can do." "Take it easy," Gretchen pleaded, her concern evident in her voice. "I can do it," he insisted, plodding on with laboured steps until he finally reached her. With a proud grin, he looked up and cocked his head to the side. "I'm not allowed to, but I've been practising on my own. Not bad, eh?" He leaned forward and kissed her tenderly. "At this rate, Mick the Cutlass will be on fighting form and ready to return to Nigeria." Gretchen forced a sad smile. Witnessing Mick's determination filled her heart with love. "How could I have ever imagined living without him?" she mused. The mere thought of that possibility made her now shudder. And to think that I imagined that Daniel had more to offer than my Mick! How foolish! She silently rebuked herself. "Oh, God," she sighed quietly. "Will he still be my Mick when I tell him about Daniel?" Gretchen wondered nervously. Noticing the sad, faraway look in her eyes, Mick cast Gretchen a worried glance. "Everything okay?" he asked her. "Yes," she fibbed. "Come on, Speedy, back to bed," she ordered gently, and they walked slowly back to his bedside. As they reached the bed, Gretchen helped Mick settle in, ensuring that he was comfortable. Her mind raced with thoughts of how to broach the sensitive topic, but nothing came to mind. She knew that it couldn't be put off any longer. Sitting down on the edge of the bed, Gretchen took Mick's hand in hers. "Mick," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you." Mick turned to face her, his gaze searching her face as he registered the gravity of her tone. "What is it, love?" he asked, concern in his voice. Gretchen hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest as she struggled to find the right words. "I've made a terrible mistake," she confessed, her eyes beginning to well up with tears. Mick looked confused. "How?" he asked. I kissed Daniel. Once," she stressed. Mick remained silently watching her. "It meant nothing," she continued. "When?" Mick asked finally. "Just over a month ago." "Is he the man who kept calling on the first day the boys came here?" "Yes." "How do you know him?" "Through a work friend." "So, not a work colleague, as you told us that day?" "No." "How did you meet?" "Like I said, through a work friend." "Under what circumstance?" "I would really like to start a bakery, and he's a pastry chef who's looking for other outlets, so a friend from work introduced us regarding the possibility of us working together." "You want to start a bakery, and you discussed it with a colleague and your man Daniel?" "He's not my man." "But you never once discussed the bakery with me," Mick continued regardless. "I wanted to research all the details before we discussed it." "And have you finished your research?" "Yes." "And have you mentioned anything about it to me?" "No." "Right," Mick nodded after a brief pause. He resumed his inquiries. "How do you feel about your friend Daniel?" "I wish you wouldn't call him that." "But he's your friend, isn't he?" Gretchen didn't answer. "How do you feel about him?" "I can't stand him." "Oh," Mick exclaimed calmly. "You go about kissing people you can't stand, do you?" "I was initially attracted to him." "And now?" "I have no interest in him." "What changed?" "I love you." Gretchen glanced up and looked Mick in the eye. "And you didn't before when you kissed him?" he challenged softly. "Things were strained between you and I at the time." "And you'd stopped loving me, had you?" "Of course not," Gretchen said quietly. "I love you and I'll always love you." As she met his gaze, she mustered a small smile, trying to alleviate some of the tension that lingered in the air between them. "I can't help what I feel," she shrugged. Mick remained silent, to Gretchen's despair. "Please say something," she pleaded, as his gaze dropped and he remained pensive. Finally looking up, Mick began to speak. "I understand," he told Gretchen to her surprise. "You're not hurt? You're not angry?" she asked, her mind unable to fathom his words and reaction. "I'm sad that we came to this," he acknowledged. Mick paused again. "Why are you telling me all this now?" he asked Gretchen. Biting her lower lip, she bowed her head. "I told him that I didn't want to pursue anything with him, and he's now stalking me." "Gretch!" Mick exclaimed, his eyes full of worry. "When Noah said about 20 missed calls from him, I did wonder. What's going on?" "He's been showing up outside the house." "For God's sake, Gretch!" Mick shouted out. "Why would you bring your shit to our home? That's where our kids live." "I didn't," she protested. "He found out where we live by pretending that he wanted to send flowers as support." "Support? What support?" "About you being in hospital," Gretchen explained. "So you only ended things because I was in hospital?" "No!" Gretchen rebuked. "I ended things when you were in hospital, and not because you were in hospital. Please understand that." "Have you called the police about his stalking?" Mick asked. "Yes." "And?" "They've spoken to him, and they will again." "Again?" Mick frowned. "So he's still showing up at our home after they've warned him?" Gretchen nodded sadly. "I'm applying for a restraining order," she informed him. "Gretch!" Mick exclaimed again in horror. "This is serious stuff." "I know." In silence, he shook his head. "I'm sorting it," Gretchen assured him. "How?" "I'm sorting it," she affirmed, and standing up began to pace the room. A few minutes later, raising his gaze to meet Gretchen's, Mick spoke. "I really appreciate you telling me everything about the affair," he told her. "It wasn't an affair!" Mick stared hard at her. "You kissed him," he reminded her. "Yes, one kiss." "A betrayal, nonetheless." "Yes," Gretchen sadly admitted, "a betrayal for which I am truly sorry." "Where does that leave us?" "Where we are now. I love you and you love me. You do still love me, don't you?" "I never stopped," Mick replied sadly. Gretchen embraced him, but he remained motionless. I never want anything to come between us ever again. She pulled back and regarded him lovingly. Please forgive me, she implored. Mick stared intently back at her. If I had betrayed you, would you forgive me? Gretchen eyed him. Why are you asking such a question? She challenged. Of course I would forgive you, and you know that. Would you really, Gretch? Yes! Mick watched his wife carefully. What if I told you that I betrayed you? He asked. Something about the way he spoke irked Gretchen. Did you? Yes. Mick! You couldn't. Why not? He stared back at her. You just wouldn't, she declared quietly. But things were strained between us at the time, remember? I don't believe you. Doesn't change anything. The fact is I did. We both did, Gretch. But I'm sorry, Gretch. Gretchen stared at him incredulous. Are you trying to hurt me? She wondered. No, love, Mick said, shaking his head. Gretchen's lips pursed. With whom? A lady from the charity. What charity? The Elder Care Advocacy Charity. The what? Elder Care Advocacy Charity. How did you meet? I was researching about starting my schizophrenia advocacy charity. Since when? Since a while now. How come you never mentioned? I did on a few occasions, but you weren't interested. Gretchen looked aghast. Are you blaming me? She asked him. No, Gretch. She suddenly remembered. Yes, he had mentioned something. Gretchen burst into tears. How could you, Mick? How could you, Gretch? It's different, she declared. I never stopped loving you, but I've never stopped loving you either. But you cheated on me, as did you. It's not the same, she insisted, and ran out of the room. End of chapter 30. Chapter 31. A few hours after Gretchen's departure from the hospital, Hector and Rupert arrived to visit Mick. Opening the door, they peeped in. From the door, Mick's eyes appeared closed. He's sleeping, Rupert surmised. Maybe we should come back tomorrow when he's awake. No, Hector objected. After his conversation with Gretchen, it must be awful being here alone. Let's wait for him to wake up and keep him company. Closing the door behind them, Hector and Rupert walked softly to Mick's bedside. He wasn't sleeping. Hey, buddy, Hector greeted. Hope we're not intruding, Rupert added, but Mick remained silently staring ahead. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Aware of the sensitive nature of the situation, Rupert and Hector exchanged concerned glances, neither knowing what to say. Eventually, Hector, always the diplomatic one, broke the ice. You look great, buddy. It's good to see how far you've come in such little time. Rupert nodded in agreement, adding, Glad to see all the tubes are gone. Yes, Mick smiled. He shifted his gaze to Hector. I suppose your house is abuzz with talk about what happened here today. Yes, Hector admitted. And that's why we're here, buddy. It's best to leave them to it. How are you? Okay. We didn't know about Daniel, Rupert interjected. Until after the stalking began, that is. I think we all found out roughly at the same time, Hector clarified. So please, buddy, don't think there was a conspiracy of secrecy against you. I understand. Thanks for letting me know that, Mick smiled sadly. You've been through a lot, Mick, Hector acknowledged. So have you. Yes, we all have. It's life, I suppose. I've lost my job, Rupert disclosed. Oh, Rupert, Mick exclaimed, shifting his gaze to Rupert. I'm really sorry to hear that. Ah, you know what it's like, Rupert shrugged. What happened? Overpaid and getting on in years. You know, the usual story. They want young and cheaper blood. So, any thoughts on what you're going to do now? I'm tired of the hustle. You, Hector mocked. It didn't look like that in Nigeria. Maybe not, but I've been doing a lot of thinking since. I'm almost 60. We all are, all three of us. Don't remind me, Hector frowned. Speak for yourselves. I've still got 3 years to go, Mick specified. Me too. I've got 2 years to go, Rupert divulged. So, like I said, we're all almost 60. Time to start looking at life through a different lens. After I've built the waste management plant, perhaps. Mick the Cutlers! Hector hailed, beginning to laugh. You're never going to stop with that, are you? Mick smiled. Never! Shaking his head, Mick turned his attention back to Rupert. So what lens are you proposing? Mick queried him. It's time I gave something back. Hector burst out laughing. The noble financier! Who would have thought it? Okay, Mr. Champagne Socialist, tell us, what are your plans? Rupert retorted. I'm toying with some ideas, Hector professed playfully, so don't you worry about me. Becoming more serious, Rupert looked at his friends. What happened to you really hit home with me, Mick. Me too, Hector confessed. Mick let out a dry laugh. I think we can all safely say that we're all agreed on that. A few more minutes and I would have been a goner. You were very lucky, Rupert told him. The whole thing scared Sarah so much that she's selling her share in the accounting firm. Why? Hector asked. She's going into teaching full time. She must be enjoying the tutoring. Yes, Rupert confirmed. It's really taken off and she feels fulfilled. And your scare, Mick, was the impetus she needed to follow her heart. Good for her, Hector commended. 60, Mick interjected as if lost in thought. Yes, the big 60, Rupert sighed. Mick turned to look at him. It's crazy hearing that number when I have sons of 8, he said, and then looked away sadly. They're wonderful boys, Hector remarked. Yes, great kids, Rupert agreed. My little men, Mick said, beginning to smile. They're such characters. And that surprises you? Look at their parents, Rupert quipped. Poor kids, Mick laughed. Indeed, Hector sympathized playfully. Mick looked thoughtfully at his friends. Do you regret not having kids? No, Hector replied. That surprises me, Mick admitted. You'd have made a great father, the both of you. No, Hector disagreed. I've had my pain issues for over 30 years now, he reminded his friends. The worst period of it was when I would have liked to have had kids. But what kind of a father would I have been? I wouldn't have been able to run around with them. And then imagine their anxiety with me being in and out of hospital as much as I used to be. True, Mick accepted. This is my only stay in the hospital, and I can already see how badly it has hit the boys. I can't imagine the toll on them if I was in and out of hospital as much as you used to be. Exactly, Hector confirmed. It wouldn't have been fair on them, or on Penny. What about you? Mick asked Rupert. Yes, sometimes, but not in a major way. What do you mean? Well, most of my adult life has been spent on planes and the office, Rupert recalled. I would have been an absent father. If you had the chance to do it all again, would you change anything? Hector asked him. For the most part, no, Rupert admitted. Although I sometimes think it would have been nice to have had kids, the truth is that they never really were a priority for me or Sarah for that matter. Neither of us wanted them badly enough. Fair enough, Mick conceded. We've got quite a few nieces and nephews between us, and seeing them whenever we do is enough to satisfy the it may have been nice part of us. You can hand them back when you're tired, right? Hector teased. Yes, Rupert agreed. He looked thoughtfully at Hector. Out of all our wives, Penny's the one I would have thought would have wanted kids the most. Did she? She did, but as it never happened, she put it down to the will of God, and that works for her. And she's okay with that. Yes, thank heavens. That is some faith, Mick riposted. I respect that, Rupert added. Man of faith now, are you, Rupert? I thought you were an atheist. No, I've never been an atheist. I'm still a good old-fashioned Church of England boy at heart. But it's just a question of time or lack of it. Unlike some. Well, we can't all be believers, Hector countered. Have you ever believed? Mick asked him. Never. How did that work when Penny was very religious? The same as you and Gretch, I suppose. I left her to crack on with her God-bothering, and she left me to my unbelief. A marriage made in heaven. In fact, she's back full throttle on God-bothering duties. Really? After all this time? Yes, our buddy here scared her right back into God's arms. And while we're on the subject, Hector said, turning to Mick, I hear that Auntie Bimbo's got your boys on the squad too, with Holy Communions happening next year. So I've heard, Mick said, smiling. Do you mind? No, in fact, I quite like it. I never thought I'd ever hear myself say that, but it's true. I'm glad they're developing a faith. How come? Mick took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I know that me being here talking to you right now is a miracle. It's time I gave the old fella up there some respect. So you're deserting me and joining the God-botherers, are you? Hector asked, feigning disappointment. I'm afraid so, fella. Wow, Hector exclaimed with fake exasperation. Your old fella up there certainly has some moves. Knock one down and they all flood home. He eyed Mick. So, Mr. Kumbaya, that means no divorce for you then? I suppose not, Mick smiled. And you have to forgive, eventually. And no affairs. There was no affair on either side, Rupert cut in. They love each other. My love has never been in question. Mick affirmed sadly. I don't think Gretchen's has either, Rupert added. She kissed that Daniel fella, and who knows what else might have happened. Nothing happened, Hector told him. I think the kiss was an attention thing, Rupert speculated. She got manipulated. Gretchen manipulated? Mick scoffed. Give me a break. Everybody can be manipulated under the right circumstances, Rupert persevered. I know, but she loves to think she's so infallible. Now she knows she isn't, and I'm going to remind her that for the rest of her life, Mick pledged. Not very godly, eh? Hector ribbed him. Rome was not built in a day, Mick riposted, and the three men laughed. Still smiling, Rupert asked Mick, Did you really cheat on her? She'll never know. I don't believe you did, Rupert told him. Mick smiled. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32. Meanwhile, in Tetherdown, at Hector and Penny's house, the women were gathered. Penny and Sarah were sitting either side of Gretchen on the sofa, while Charlotte sat, rocking herself back and forth on the rocking chair in a distracted manner. Having been given a blow-by-blow detail of the episode in the hospital between Gretchen and Mick, they all sat in pensive silence. Penny spoke first. I know what Mick told you, Gretch, but I still can't believe that he had an affair. Why not? He said he did. I know, but I just can't see him doing it. He's potty about you. Clearly not that potty, Gretchen retorted angrily, standing up. She flashed Charlotte a glare. Will you stop with the rocking? She hissed. I'll rock as much as I want, Gretchen. Charlotte hit back and began to rock even more. Clearly agitated, Gretchen returned to her seat. Say something, Sarah, she demanded. Sarah raised her hand languidly, as if in appeal. I don't know what to say, Gretch. You think I pushed him to it, don't you? She told Sarah. I never said anything of the sort. But you're thinking it. Oh, for God's sake, Gretchen. Gretch, Penny appealed. I know you're upset, but all these accusations are not getting us anywhere. Charlotte stopped rocking. I know you don't want to hear it, but I don't believe Mick cheated on you. Did you believe that Nathan would cheat on you? Gretchen hissed. Gretchen! Sarah cried. That's out of order, and uncalled for, Penny added. I'm sorry, Gretchen pouted, but why won't any of you believe him that he had an affair? He said so himself. Yes, but he probably said it to hurt you, Charlotte concluded. That I can believe, Penny agreed. Yes, it's a good one. I wish I'd thought of that for Nathan, Charlotte quipped. That would have been a great parting shot. The shock of which would have killed him, Sarah chuckled. I'm not that lucky, Charlotte retorted dryly. Gretchen glared at them in dismay. You're supposed to be my friends. And we are, Gretch, come on, Penny said. And how come none of you are on my side? We are, Gretchen, Sarah snapped. And that's why we're being honest with you. We could sit here and lie to you, telling you that he's a douchebag, he's a good-for-nothing, but he's not, Gretch. Mick's a good guy, and it would be a crying shame if you lost him. How can I stay with him after he has admitted to cheating on me? You were expecting him to stay with you after you kissed Daniel, Sarah reminded her. But I didn't have an affair. It doesn't matter, Gretch. It was a betrayal of his trust, Sarah hit back. I'm sorry, but no, Sarah, Gretchen protested. I can't stay with Mick after this. Your call, a visibly irritated Sarah concluded. You said Mick is your forever guy, though, Charlotte reminded her. Isn't that worth forgiveness for one indiscretion about which you would never have known had he not confessed? Gretchen stared aghast at Charlotte. You shock me, she exclaimed. Nathan was your forever guy. How many times did you forgive him for cheating? And did it stop him? No, of course not. Oh, God, Gretchen, Sarah muttered, shaking her head in disappointment and leaving the room. You bitch, Gretch, Charlotte hissed, and grabbing her bag stood up to go. Penny intercepted her. Please don't go, Charlotte, she appealed. I can't stay, Penny. I'm sorry, Charlotte told her as the tears welled up in her eyes. There's so much shit going on in my life right now, and I'm literally on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I know, darling. I came here to support her. I know. And all she's done is bash me where it hurts the most. What kind of a friend is that? Charlotte asked. Gretchen began to cry. I'm so sorry, Lottie, she said, rising to her feet and walking to both women. I'm just hurting so much. So am I, Charlotte told her, also beginning to cry, as Penny gently embraced her. I know, Gretchen accepted. Then why go for me as you have done tonight? I don't know. It doesn't change your situation, Gretchen. I know, Gretchen agreed. Please forgive me, Lottie. Reaching out for her with one arm, Charlotte drew Gretchen into a group hug. Just then Sarah appeared, carrying a bottle of Prosecco and 4 glasses. "I think we could all do with some of this, don't you?" "Definitely," Charlotte laughed, taking 2 of the glasses from Sarah and handed them to Penny and Gretchen. Placing the other 2 on the mantelpiece, Sarah opened the bottle and poured each one of them a full glass. Taking a large sip from hers, she smiled. "Ah, that's better." She relaxed and returned to her seat, as did her friends. "So what now?" Penny asked Gretchen. "I don't know," she replied sadly. "I don't want my marriage to end, but I'm so hurt that Mick could have an affair. I'm conflicted." "Fair enough," Sarah yielded. "You're entitled to feel hurt. It's only natural. But please don't let that be your driving force in whatever you decide." "Yes," Penny agreed. "There's Noah and Dominic to think about." "I know," Gretchen sighed sadly. "I've got a lot of thinking to do." End of chapter 32. Whew. Wow. Straight to the questions. Why do they all doubt that Mick has had an affair? He said so, didn't he? What are your thoughts? Do you believe him? If so, why? Do you doubt him? If so, why? I'd love to know. Please, as usual, in the comments section. And I look forward to being back with you next week for the last week. The last few chapters. Wow, can't believe it's coming to the end. Thanks again for being here week after week after week. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I wish you all a very wonderful, happy week ahead. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.